Israel Adesanya had beaten almost everyone, but Alex Pereira was different. He had already beaten him twice, and at UFC 281, Izzy was one win away from finally burying that past. But Pereira didn't come to challenge the champion. He came to prove the ghost was still alive. One win from freedom. That is what this fight meant for Adesanya. He was already the champion. He already had the belt. He already had the fame, the highlights, and the respect. But against Pereira, none of that felt complete. Because no matter how dominant Izzy looked in the UFC, people always brought up the same thing. Kickboxing, the losses, the knockout, the one opponent who seemed to exist just to question his greatness. And now, inside the octagon, Adesanya finally had the chance to change the story. Not in another sport, not in another lifetime, right here, under UFC lights. One win and the past could finally become just history. But one mistake, and the past would come back alive. Pereira walked in like destiny. Not loud, not emotional, not desperate for attention. He didn't need to sell the fight with words. His presence already did that. Because every time Adesanya looked across the cage, he wasn't just seeing another challenger. He was seeing the man from his past. The man who had already hurt him. The man who had already taken the ending away from him once before. And that is what made Pereira so dangerous. He didn't enter the octagon like someone chasing history. He entered like someone who believed history was already on his side. Izzy had the belt, but Pereira had the memory. And sometimes, memory is heavier than gold. Izzy started like the champion, and for a while, it looked like the story was finally changing. Adesanya was sharp, calm, patient. He wasn't rushing into Pereira's power. He was making him miss, touching him from range, changing angles, forcing Pereira to reset before he could plant his feet. And that mattered, because Pereira is most dangerous when he is still, when he can step in, sit down on his punches, and make one shot feel like a car crash. But early on, Izzy kept taking that away. He moved just enough, countered just enough, controlled just enough. And near the end of the first round, he even hurt Pereira badly. For a moment, it felt like Adesanya had finally found the answer. Watch Pereira's left hand, because this is where the fight becomes dangerous. Adesanya looked in control. He was moving well, he was touching Pereira first. He was making the challenger reset, but Pereira was not lost. He was waiting. Every step forward had a purpose. Every small pressure moment was taking something away from Izzy. And from this point on, don't just watch the scoreboard. Don't just watch the movement. Watch Pereira's left hand, because that is where the ending begins. The pressure was quietly building. And this is the part many people miss. Pereira was not winning every second. He was not dominating every exchange, but he was slowly changing where the fight was happening. Step by step, Izzy had less space, a little closer to the fence, a little less room to escape, a little more time spent reacting instead of leading. And that is dangerous against Pereira. Because he does not need 10 clean shots. He needs one moment where you cannot move the way you want. So watch the cage line. Watch how often Adesanya has to reset. Watch how Pereira keeps walking him back without rushing. If you notice this live, write it in the comments. Because this was not panic. This was pressure. Quiet, patient, and slowly becoming a trap. Adesanya was one round away, and that is what makes this fight so painful to rewatch. After everything, after the kickboxing losses, after the knockout, after years of people saying Pereira was the one man Izzy could not escape, Adesanya was almost there. He had won long stretches of the fight. He had hurt Pereira early. He had controlled distance. He had made the champion's case with his movement, timing, and patience. And if you were watching live, be honest. At this point, did you think Pereira still had enough left to take it back? Because for many people, this felt like Izzy's story was finally about to close. One more round, 5 more minutes, one clean finish to the past. But against Pereira, that is the mistake. You can never treat the fight like it is already over. The calf kicks changed the fight, and this is where Pereira's work became bigger than just pressure. Because Adesanya's entire style depends on movement, distance, angles, small steps that let him escape before danger fully arrives. But every calf kick took a piece of that away. Not all at once, slowly. One kick made him reset, another made him think before stepping out, another made his stance a little less stable. And when a fighter like Izzy loses even half a second of movement, everything changes. Now the fence feels closer, the exits disappear faster, the counters become harder to trust. And Pereira knows this. He was not just attacking the leg, he was attacking the escape route. That is the detail many people miss. The finish did not begin with the final punches. It began when Izzy's legs stopped giving him the same freedom. The moment Pereira found him. This is where everything finally connects. The pressure, the calf kicks, the cage control, the patience. All of it led to this. Adesanya was no longer moving with the same freedom he had earlier. His exits were slower, his reactions were tighter. And when Pereira stepped forward, Izzy had less space to disappear. That is the difference between chasing someone and finding them. Pereira was not just throwing punches because time was running out. He was reading where Izzy had to go. He cut off the escape, forced the exchange, and suddenly, the champion was exactly where Pereira wanted him. Near the fence, under pressure, unable to reset cleanly. And this is the moment you should watch again. Because Pereira did not just land. He finally trapped the one fighter who had spent the whole night trying not to be trapped. The comeback that stole the crown. And when Pereira finally had Izzy trapped, he did not let the moment escape. This was the danger that had followed Adesanya all night. One mistake, one bad position, one moment where movement was no longer enough. Pereira started unloading. Not wild, not desperate, heavy, accurate, relentless. Every shot made the cage feel smaller. Every reaction from Izzy looked more uncomfortable than the last. And suddenly, the champion who had been one round away from freedom was fighting just to survive. That is why this finish felt so brutal, because Izzy was not losing the whole story, he was losing the ending. After all the control, after all the patience, after being so close to rewriting the past, Pereira took the crown in the final round. And the ghost that followed Izzy became the champion standing in front of him. The rivalry that wouldn't end. Because after this fight, Pereira did not just become champion. He became the one question Adesanya still had to answer. Again. In kickboxing, Pereira had taken the result. In the UFC, he had taken the belt. And that is what made this rivalry different. It was not just about who was more skilled. It was about who owned the story. Izzy had moments where he looked faster, sharper, more complete. But Pereira had something that changed everything. Power that could erase rounds. Pressure that could survive losing minutes. And the patience to wait for one mistake. That is why this fight stayed in people's minds. Because Adesanya was so close to freedom. But Pereira reminded everyone that close is not the same as finished. Who really owned the story? Was it Izzy, because he was winning until the final round? Or Pereira, because he only needed one moment to take everything? Write your answer in the comments. And if you missed the last breakdown, watch it next, because that fight also changed a champion's legacy.